I will not be pushed, filed, stamped, indexed, briefed, debriefed, or numbered. My life is my own.
Hello, my friends. How's everyone doing today? You know, of all the philosophical issues that I've had to contend with in my own mind in my life, I think besides the issue of life itself and existence, perhaps the next one in line that is the most difficult to assess is war. Something that I've pondered so many times that I feel like my brain is broken at times trying to understand the proper context and pretext for a war, whether wars are necessary, whether they're inevitable, whether we could live in a utopia without war. And it's always bothered me that war is used more as a financial incentive than anything for the media outlets to talk about, but only when it suits them. And I did post a cynical post the other day saying, you know, imagine if the media covered what's going on in Syria and the Middle East in general as much as they're covering what's going on in Ukraine. But I'd like to cover that more in depth here. And I'd really like to, first off, say the sarcasm or cynicism was not about demeaning Ukraine or in any way saying that it's not a problem, but rather to say that we have selective bias as to what issues we consider to be important. And this is true in the media, but this is different. What's going on in the Ukraine right now is one of those wars, it's one of those issues, I should say, one of those invasions that really brings back up and rekindles some of those confusions I've had in the past about should the U.S. get involved? Should countries go to the rescue of other countries? I didn't live during World War II or World War I, so obviously I can't be in the mindset of a citizen at that point. And I know that there was a lot of speculation around people wanting to go to war, trying to revive the economy through convincing the public to go to war. There's rumors that Pearl Harbor was allowed to happen, therefore giving the American public, you know, to support the war and the U.S. joining the war efforts. It's issues like that and those little speculations about the war machine, the fact that stocks in the U.S. war machine companies, stocks just jumped as soon as this war started, with the anticipation that the U.S. would be selling weapons or giving weapons to other factions or to Ukraine themselves. Now, I don't want to go too into depth on my speculations. I would just like to say that even though the media has bias on this, this is a major issue that really could have serious ramifications for the entire planet. I don't want to see a world war, and I'm not buying into this idea of a nuclear war. I know a lot of people are speculating that, you know, there's a threat because he's put himself on high alert. Putin said that he's put his nuclear forces on alert, which would only be a natural response to any type of Western aggression or threats. Since you and I don't know what's going on behind closed doors, let alone the Iron Curtain, we have our own Iron Curtains over here, and we don't know what our government does, what they're planning, what's going on behind closed doors. All we can do as citizens is stand up for other citizens. And when I see 330, I think it was 350,000 people jumped across the border into Poland, that's a third of a million people, and they were welcomed with open arms. So we have this, not only people jumping across the border, but it's very fascinating to me. There were videos in mainstream media about soldiers sitting down with groups of citizens in the town with piles of styrofoam, filling up bottles with gasoline and styrofoam and showing them how to make incendiary devices or Molotov cocktails. Which, to the average Westerner, we would say, right on, you know, and cheer, whatever a citizen can do. Because as an American, we can't imagine what it would be like if somebody invaded our country. We can pretend, but we can't imagine. But I guarantee you, if that did happen, all the people who were opposed to firearms and thought that we can live and let the government take care of us would quickly realize that's complete nonsense, that the average citizen has to be able to defend themselves, knowing how to use a firearm, knowing how to protect yourself, and knowing how to fight back against an invading force would be a good thing to know. But generally here, we're lazy because it's not that big of a deal. We don't have any real fear of a land invasion. But for a small country like the Ukraine, I mean, that's exactly what's happening. And it's happening with ferocity. They are moving in quickly, and I don't think that the Russians expected to meet this kind of resistance. But this makes me back up. And I say, well, this is what the media is saying. They didn't expect this. Well, of course they expected it. They had to expect it. I mean, yeah, Russia is a defunct, fucked up government. But at the same time, they do have, one of the most well-known espionage programs and, black projects of any country in the world because they spend so much money on these things. So it's not that they didn't know what was going to happen. But there's this underlying question of what do they want and what are they trying to do? A lot of us as Americans have to admit, especially whether you're American or not, I guess, that we're all pretty ignorant of the maps and the issues surrounding certain areas. Most of us. Some people are really into that stuff, but most of us have to look and say, oh, okay, that's where Crimea is. Oh, I see. I understand now. It's annexed. There's a bridge to Crimea, but they can't get there by land. Having that land would be very useful to Russia. But the question is, why are they willing to do this right now with such disregard for human life? And you find out that they bombed this, one of their public squares in their second biggest town. Hospitals, you hear about bridges being bombed, but then I also heard a story where some of the Ukrainians said that they'd actually blown up their own bridges to keep the Russians from crossing it. And this is where everything gets into speculation. And this is where people kind of throw in the towel and say, well, I don't know what's going on. Hopefully they figure their shit out. And I believe that we all want to stand with our tribe, but the big question is, who is your tribe? And I don't want to really bring up this factor to make comparisons here, but I guarantee you if they showed videos in the Western media of brown people in the Middle East making Molotov cocktails, they would call them terrorists. Because that's the kind of bullshit programming that we have been fed for so long. Because the U.S. has interests in the Middle East. We will complain about Russia, what Russia does in Syria, but, for those who are unaware, we basically play the Middle East like pawns. We use them as pawns in our chess game with us and Russia and China as well. And meanwhile, while all this is going on, China has been eyeballing Taiwan for a long time. They want it back. As far as they're considered, it's theirs, and it's a very difficult time because I think, apparently, I recall this from about 6 months ago, the Russians launched a hypersonic missile, and I believe that North Korea is working on this, and China, of course, as well, but a hypersonic missile travels 7 times the speed of sound. It's unstoppable. If one of these launches into space and then heads back down into the atmosphere, you can't stop it. There's no weapon or defense in our arsenal in the U.S. that would stop one of these things. And I think that it scared the shit out of our officials. You haven't heard much about it, but if you look it up, look into the hypersonic missile with Russia, it said that it scared the crap out of the U.S. intelligence officials because they didn't realize that they had that capability. And I think that Russia doesn't necessarily want to use these weapons. They just want to use them as a defensive measure to say, we're going to do what we want to do, and you better stay out of it, or you'll see what we've got. And this is the same way war has gone for the longest time. Forever. We have better weapons, so therefore we're going to do what we want to do. And it's very difficult for the West to say, shame on you, when this is exactly what we've been doing. And this is where I come to my confusion about war itself, about the United States as a force to be reckoned with. I live in a country that was considered, and by many still is today, the most powerful nation on earth. We have an unlimited arsenal and nobody fucks with us, right? Well, things have changed. Wars aren't fought on the ground with handheld weapons anymore. Wars are fought through computers. Wars are fought taking down grids. And there's a well-known, it's well known that there's a whole bunch of Russian hacker groups that have already tapped into our power grids and left messages or calling cards, if you will, saying, we could shut this down, but we're not going to, in a nutshell. It goes much deeper than that. But they've let us know for a long time that they don't have to send a missile overseas. All they have to do is push a couple buttons on a keyboard. And that, to me, is even scarier, because there's sleeper codes hidden in some of these programs for our, perhaps, nuclear facilities, perhaps some of our, power plants in general. We could overload a circuit, blow out transformers. There's so many things that could happen right now that are worse and more devastating than nuclear war. Guaranteed. Things that would take us down for generations. I mean, nuclear war would be a horrible thing as well, of course, don't get me wrong. But everyone loses, no matter what war we fight. And I don't know what to do, or how to feel. I honestly don't. I think Putin's a madman, but I think that the United States government has not really behaved much better in past decades. And it's hard to stand by anyone, outlook on things by what we consider officials or authorities, because there's a vested interest in making more profits. And a lot of people just say, why should we care at all? And I guess that's subjective. It really is. I think what bothers me is that the people are the ones that suffer. And it's bullshit when citizens get targeted for any reason. The innocent civilians that get tied up in this crap. Switzerland yesterday, which is a well-known neutral country, took sides. And that's a rare thing, because Switzerland, as we know, holds many of the banks and much of the wealth of many of these oligarchs from around the world. And I think that Russia should have expected that they would get sanctions, but it obviously wasn't enough. It's not like that's a surprise to them. They knew that would happen. It's not like Putin's dumb. I mean, he's maybe a madman, but he's not stupid enough to think that he's not going to get sanctions and have his assets frozen. They have a huge reserve of gold, but ultimately that means nothing in the big picture. What matters the most is not how much land you own or how much control you have, but how much your citizens respect you. From what I understand, only 14% of Russians claim to support what they're doing in Ukraine. And that's people in their own country. Leaders have for a long time gone to wars that their people did not support, including the United States. One of the greatest warmongers in the world, considering ourselves to be the world police. Which brings me full circle to the big question. In this case, should we be the world police? Should we be giving weapons to Ukrainians? Should we be delivering them fighter jets? And should we be giving them air and ground support? As of a couple hours ago, I believe there was a convoy miles long with thousands of Russian troops heading down a couple of narrow roads towards Kiev. And I thought, why not take them out now? Why are people hesitating? You have an invading ground force which is on narrow roads heading to one location. Take out the front line. I mean, freeze the convoy. There's something else going on. There's always something else going on. There's a lack of clear information. And until the public are given the full story of what's going on, people are going to continue to speculate. They're going to continue to place blame on everyone else, including Biden. There's always somebody to blame. Instead of blaming, Western leaders for their inaction, I don't know. Sometimes it's more complicated than we'd like to see on the outside. Everybody has an opinion on what we should do. I'm very curious to know your opinions on it. Please leave a comment. Let me know what you think. It shouldn't be a controversial topic. This is about personal freedoms. This is about fear. Fear is the topic of a video I was going to do next, and I just had to touch on this first because I thought it was important. So I appreciate you all coming along. Thanks for listening, and let me know what you think and what we could possibly do about this. You know, I feel for the people of Ukraine. 1 million people displaced, as if we didn't have enough bullshit going on with COVID and everything else in the modern day. You know, having to deal with war on top of it is almost like, get the fuck out of here. Keep governments out of our shit. Leave the people the fuck alone and let us do our own lives. We don't need leadership pushing into other regions. It's just, it's complete absurdity that this is still going on in the 21st century. But, as I said, I don't expect it to change. But there's part of me that wants to believe that humans can change. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. Be well.
Purpose channel.
Thanks for coming to Carpo's channel, yo.